Hello, I'm Matthew Goldstein, Chancellor of the City University of New York. Welcome to this special edition of CUNY Honors. The City University of New York has embarked on a major initiative to build on our long and distinguished history of teaching and research in the sciences and related disciplines. Our nation's ability to compete in the international marketplace of science careers and ideas is a matter of national security. We have decided that 2005 through 2015 will be called the Decade of Science at the City University of New York. We are ramping up our efforts to modernize science facilities, stimulate student interest and retention, and educate teachers committed to teaching mathematics and science in our city's middle and high schools. At the core of our work are our very distinguished CUNY faculty, dedicated to providing students with all of the tools needed for their success. With me today are four prominent CUNY scientists. On my right, Dr. Ruth Stark, Distinguished Professor of Chemistry at the College of Staten Island and the Graduate Center. She has been a CUNY faculty member since 1985 and will be teaching at the City College this fall. Dr. Stark directs the CUNY Institute for Molecular Assemblies. Her research interest focuses on the molecular structure of dynamics of large molecular assemblies. All the way on my left is Dr. Jill Bargonetti. She is Professor of Biology at Hunter College, where she has taught since 1994. Her research examines cell life and its regulation by tumor suppressor protein p53. Educated in New York's public schools, Dr. Bargonetti has received a United States Presidential Early Career Award, considered the highest national honor for young scientific investigators among her many honors. Good to see you. All the way on my right is Dr. DERRICK Brazill, Associate Professor of Biology at Hunter College. He was awarded a $1.3 million grant from the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation for his research on how organisms monitor and regulate cell density. Professor Brazill has also received the Presidential Early Career Award and is very much involved in mentoring students. And lastly, Dr. Michio Kaku has taught for more than 25 years at the City College, where he holds the Henry Semmett Chair and Professorship. He is a theoretical physicist who has done fundamental work in string field theory. In addition to his work on Einstein's theory of everything, Professor Kaku is an accomplished author and host of Explorations, a weekly nationally syndicated program heard on 100 radio stations. In 2006, Professor Kaku hosted a 4-part miniseries for BBC TV about the mysterious nature of time. Thank you all for being with us together, and we look forward to a lively discussion. I'd like to start by asking each of you what inspired you originally to go into a world of science and a career dedicated to the study and dissemination of knowledge about science. Was it a teacher? Was it friends? Was it your own motivation? Where did it all begin, Dr. Stark?
Well, it's a little bit of a hard question to answer because it takes me pretty far back, but I think that, as you might expect, it was a combination of things. Certainly an inspiring teacher. I remember my high school chemistry teacher was really energetic and really got everybody going and made the subject accessible. And I think that was really very important. I think at that stage, I didn't know to be afraid of anything. It was just grab everything and learn it. And this teacher was really an extremely important influence. And I think the other thing that inspired me was the idea that the field of chemistry combined physical insight and mathematical insight, and also everyday usefulness. And that sort of drew me into biophysics and biomedical science. So the idea of combining just the love of learning with something that could pay off in the real world.
That's great. Dr. Bargonetti, tell us about your early experiences. What is it that touched you, that led to your distinguished career as a very interesting and important scientist today?
I would harken back to high school. Excellent teachers in high school, and I was at Bronx High School of Science here in New York, and they allowed us to see how genetic engineering really was what was happening for the future. So when I was in high school, it was just beginning, and they connected genetic engineering to ethics, and so I could see it in the broader picture. And once I went into my first genetics class, they had specialized genetics class, I saw that I could understand myself and my inheritance. So I'm biracial, and I could put everything together in a way that I had not been able to put it together, and thinking about birth defects and genetics and ethics and all of it in the classroom, even though they were teaching the mechanics. And so it really was exciting.
So you were privileged to start at a very elite high school in the city, the Bronx High School of Science. So by the time you finished and you started your university work, you sort of knew what you were touched by and what you were going to pursue.
No.
Not at all, no?
No.
Well, what happened along the way?
So I was interested in dance and science, and then I went on to another public school. I went to SUNY Purchase, and I was a dance major for a while and a science major for a while. I was putting together spatial relationships and genetics and thinking, and I just loved choreographing biological processes, and they would let me do this at SUNY Purchase. And, you know, one thing just led to another, and once again, an excellent professor who pushed me to apply to graduate school. And, you know, I just kept following my interests and my love, and it kind of led me there. I didn't make a decision. It just happened.
So your interest in dance was not influenced by your interest in Newtonian mechanics at all. They were independent events.
They were independent, but definitely a love of spatial.
Derrick, Brazill, tell us about how it started with you.
Well, for me, it goes back a little bit further than high school. For me, it was elementary school. I remember it was more the sense of discovery that really excited me, not knowing what was going to happen when you did something like an experiment. I specifically remember back in first grade, we had a science teacher, and we were growing bean sprouts under different conditions. And it was exciting not knowing what was going to happen, which conditions would be best, which conditions would be worse. And after the experiment was done and we actually got the answer, it was kind of neat. So that whole sense of discovery for me was what really drew me into science. And the more I learned about science, the more I learned that there were lots of questions out there that still needed to be answered, and the opportunities to do research and to gain that sense of discovery. After that, I was hooked.
Where was this early schooling? Where was your childhood spent?
Back in the Bay Area in California, San Francisco Bay Area.
And was there a teacher that said, Derrick, you're going to be a scientist?
I don't know if there was a specific teacher. I mean, there were a number of teachers that saw that I had an aptitude for science and I enjoyed it, and so they encouraged me, absolutely. So, but I wouldn't say there's any one particular teacher, though. All of them, really.
Well, we're privileged to have you at the City University of New York. We're really blessed. Michio, everybody knows your work. You're on television, you're interviewed, you're the guy to go to when we ask about deep questions of theoretical physics and the theory of everything and string theory and so forth. Where did it begin with you? How were you touched?
When I was 8 years old, my elementary school teacher walked in and announced that a great scientist had just died. Everyone was talking about it. On the front page of the Evening News that night, the big banner headlines, Albert Einstein has passed away. But the picture they showed was fascinating. The picture that was on every single wire service was a picture of his desk with the unfinished manuscript of his greatest unfinished work. Now, to me, I was 8 years old. I wanted to know, why couldn't the greatest scientists of our era finish that theory, right? What was that theory? Now, it took me years to finally figure it out by reading books, But that was Einstein's theory of everything. He wanted an equation 1 inch long that would allow us to read the mind of God. 1 inch equation that would create the universe, galaxies, stars, Earth, people, maybe even love. And then when I was in high school, I decided to pursue this. I asked my mom permission to build an atom smasher in the garage. I said, Mom, can I build a 2.3 million electron volt betatron particle accelerator in the garage? And my mom said, sure, why not? And don't forget to take out the garbage. So I took out the garbage and I assembled 400 pounds of transformer steel, 22 miles of copper wire that we wound on the high school football field. And finally, it was done. When I plugged it in, it consumed 6 kilowatts of power, 10,000 Gauss magnetic field, enough to pull the fillings out of your teeth, in fact. And I blew out all the circuit breakers in the house, and the whole house was plunged in darkness. So every time my mom came home, she said, why couldn't I have a son who plays baseball? Maybe if I give him a basketball. And why can't he find a nice Japanese girl? I mean, why does he have to build these machines in the garage?
But she knew she had a genius in her midst, right?
Well, that set me off.
You know, when I was a young person, I was interested in mathematics. And one day my parents saw me on the floor in the living room throwing dice. And they thought that I was, you know, doing numbers or trying to do something illicit. What I was trying to do was to see if I had thrown the dice 1,000 times, if the empirical distribution would formulate a binomial distribution on a 0-1 basis. So mine was much less. Mine was much less. It was cheaper and much less forgiving. Let me ask you all a very serious question that really led me to suggest this discussion today. We are deeply concerned in the United States today that not enough young people are being introduced to science at an early enough age, not showing the kind of interest in what we would call the STEM disciplines, science, engineering, technology, mathematics. And that lack of interest is showing itself at universities today, where there is really just a paucity of people studying these disciplines. And if you travel abroad to Asia, Europe, Latin America, Eastern Europe, you see universities bursting at the seams and more students taking these courses in a very serious way, very demanding courses. And when we look at assessment tests, the United States, unfortunately, is probably in the bottom quartile when we look at achievement across the world. What is the very fundamental problem that you as educators and as accomplished scientists see? Why in the United States are we experiencing this problem? And what would you suggest for turning this around? In my introductory remarks, I used the phrase, a national security problem. I deeply believe this is a national security problem for the United States. It's a very serious and critical question that we have to answer about why we're not doing better. Derrick, what do you see as some of the problems, and how would you guide us in thinking about how to turn this around?
I think a lot of it has to do with maybe the way science is taught in elementary and junior high and high schools. I don't think it's very engaging for the students. I know that oftentimes the labs that are associated with science courses tend to be relatively cookbook, where you do X, you do Y, you do Z, and you get a result. And that's fine if you're baking a cake, but if you're trying to get someone excited about doing research, excited about science, that's not going to do it. So you need to make it more interactive, you need to make it more engrossing, you need to make it more exciting for the student. So it's not that the student knows what's going to happen at the end, make so the student doesn't know. So that when they get to the result, they're like, wow, I didn't expect that.
So do you say in part it's about teachers not knowing how to engage students at an early enough age, not having the tools to excite them about the subjects?
I guess that's part of it, but I think also it's just the way that it's being taught. It's not necessarily the teachers, just the curricula, I think, are the problem.
And would you, if you had your druthers and were able to stand in front of a class in middle school, or perhaps even elementary school. Do you think that you could suggest different ways of presenting the material?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I think if we went along the lines of making it more inquiry-based as opposed to read the text, memorize this, I think that that would go a long way towards exciting the students about science.
Michio, you're a theoretician. You don't stand in a laboratory. You sit with pieces of paper and pencil or sitting in front of a computer. You're using deep mathematical ideas and modeling and so forth. One of the problems that we do see is that students are shying away from mathematics and the computational sciences, and that when they come to universities like our universities and other universities, some very elite universities, there is almost a communality of belief among the professoriate that students are just not able to do college-level mathematics at the way in which they would hope. Where do you're a theoretician. You understand the power of mathematics for your discipline. What is the problem there? Why do we have a problem in mathematics?
Well, we are all born scientists. When we're born, we want to know where did we come from, why does the stars shine, how does it all fit together? Then we hit junior high school. And then we start to lose people by the millions in junior high school. Those are the danger years, okay? Not just raging hormones, okay? But science is not cool, okay? All of a sudden, kids think that to be cool, you have to go with the crowd, watch TV, all the latest shows, and it's not cool to be a scientist. Plus, the way science is taught is stressing on memorization. My daughter went to the Bronx High School of Science, and she took the Regents exam. And in geology, I had to tutor her. And afterwards, I felt like ripping that Regents exam in half. I was so angry. She had to memorize all the names of all the crystals, memorize all the trivial detail that are totally irrelevant, that you could look up in an encyclopedia. But the principles of geology, how rocks are transformed, I mean, the principles by which earthquakes take place, all that was just basically relegated to A, B, C, okay? All the other questions was name the crystals, which I don't even know, okay? It was very embarrassing. So I began to realize that A, our education system is based on memorization. We equate that with knowledge. B, that it's not cool to be a scientist. And C, when I was coming up, we had the Sputnik generation. Sputnik went up in 1957, and all of a sudden the President of the United States said that it is national survival that we start to get into science and math because the Russians are just beating the pants off us. I don't see that sense of urgency today. We don't see that sense of urgency. Why doesn't science collapse in the United States? Because of the H-1B visa, the so-called genius visa. 50% of Silicon Valley is foreign-born, okay, from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and India. A lot of our high-tech positions are taken by people that are not born in the United States. That's how bad the situation is right now. So I say that it is a question of national survival, but no one says that. In an era of globalization, we're going to be competing with China, India. We're going to be competing with all these countries where there is no excuse. The marketplace will decide, except there's no sense of urgency at the top, and there's no sense of urgency at the bottom, because teachers allow science to be uncool.
Jill, you are a laboratory scientist. You have a very active lab. You have graduate students. I assume you have undergraduate students working in your lab today. Both Derrick and Michio talk about curricula as being somewhat stultifying and not really creating those juices of inquiry that one needs. And rote learning and so forth is just not the way that science really should be taught. As a laboratory scientist and spending time on experiments, how do you excite your students about inquiry and about exploration and about discovery? Because that's really what you're about. Do you give them degrees of freedom to go off on their own? Do you keep them on a very, narrow path? How do you educate as a laboratory scientist at all levels that you're doing?
in the laboratory, you give a project and then you send the student off to try to engage in that project, and you have to allow them freedom to make mistakes. So, you're watching over them and you're looking at the data, but I'm a firm believer that they have to think about being inside those tubes. So I'm always telling them to imagine they're in the tube, to think about everything that's in the tube, everything that's going on the tube, to try to visualize it. And sometimes they forget and they make these mistakes and they don't understand what the mistake was, but they have to get to that wall a little bit in order for them to intellectually engage and bring themselves to the next level, as opposed to me always taking them and telling them what they should do, because then it doesn't come from inside themselves for them to become the scientist. So to become the scientist, they really have to think and get past and decide how they're going to be a problem solver, how they're going to solve that problem and move to the next level, and be excited when they solve the problem and get the data and come to me to show me the problem that they've solved. And I think that's really the exciting piece of science, getting the data and solving the problems. And that's a hit that makes you want to get more of those hits, to solve more problems and to generate more data. And when you get to that point that you can't wait to walk in the lab and see your piece of data, like before you even take off your coat, you want to go look at the data, because that's the most exciting piece. That's what I try to create inside the laboratory, that they're excited and solve the problems themselves.
Ruth, does that ring familiar to you?
Yes, it
because
does.
You also are
Right.
spending a lot of time in a laboratory.
I think what Jill says that resonates with me is the idea that she's trying to get the students to see themselves as discoverers, as scientists. And I think that when I think about what the crisis is, one of the issues is that the young students don't see themselves as stepping into our shoes. And of course, it's not realistic for them to always see themselves as becoming academics. We don't need that many academics, but they need to see themselves as discoverers, and they need to see the careers out the other end that they could pursue. So if they are going to think about chemistry, they could be going into the pharmaceutical industry, they could be patent lawyers, they could be teachers, they could be any number of things, and they need to see those possibilities, as well as the fact that all of them involve discovery at one level or another. And that, I think, is maybe part of what's missing in the teaching, whether it's at the elementary school level or whether it's in a research lab, because they need to see how they are going to develop into really doing that occupation. And that's hard to achieve.
There was a time when people would wear labels. I'm a biologist, I'm a theoretical physicist, I'm an applied mathematician, I'm this, I'm that. But today, the world of science is done more in a collaborative way than it was done before. The Einsteins of the world would work alone in their studies and then share their results and be engaged that way. But today it's much more of a communal kind of effort. It's also much more interdisciplinary.
I'm a molecular biophysicist.
Well, a molecular biophysicist means that you have to understand chemistry, biology, and physics. And the question that I have for you is, it must be very hard today to do the kind of science that you all are doing, because not only do you need to know your narrowly defined discipline, which is very wide and very complex and very deep, but you really have to be educated in other disciplines as well. And that may or may not be the case, but you respond to that.
Well, but I think that's the beauty of it. You don't need to know everything about everything. You need to be willing to ask questions of the people that you collaborate with. So the collaborative nature of scientific research is one of the most exciting things for me, because I will go out and grab something new and try to integrate it into my little worldview. So I see that as a great challenge, and if you're willing to ask some dumb questions and just say, well, I don't understand this and this and this, and how are you coming at this, then it enriches what you're doing. I think the interdisciplinarity is one of the great beauties of my field and many others that really probably wasn't as strong a thing when I was being trained. I was trained as a physical chemist, but now I do all these other things. So I see it as a great attractiveness because it means that someone can come at a problem. If I'm studying the skin of plants and tomatoes and so on, they can come at it from a genetic engineering perspective or a mechanical engineering perspective, and all of those are legitimate, and now we can do that.
Derrick, you also are a laboratory scientist, but you do some very, very basic theoretical work as well. In your laboratory or in your collaborative work, do you bring in mathematicians, computer scientists, physicists? I mean, how do you engage these folks that may not know as much about the experiment or the questions that you're dealing with, and getting them to use their tools, their talents, their skills to help you move that envelope a little further?
Right. So I interact, I guess, most with mathematicians, dealing mainly with the diffusion of signaling molecules, since I deal with how cells communicate with each other, how they send signals back and forth. So one of the things you have to look at is how far can a signal move? What does the size of the signal have to do with how far it can move? And so the problem with engaging people in other fields is that you need to be able to break down your question, which you know intimately in very, very minute detail, to make it more of a broader question, because that's what's going to engage a mathematician, for example. You need to make it very basic so that they can bring in their expertise to help answer that question. And so it can be difficult. Because biologists, for example, have a very different language than mathematicians, than physicists. And so it's a matter of trying to find that common ground, trying to find the common language so you can explain what your problem is so that they can help solve it, and what they can then explain to you how they went about solving that problem.
I'd like to keep this thought and this path of discussion, but we do have to take a break. And then when we get back, I'd like to engage with some of our students who I know are chomping at the bit to get a question in. So give us a moment and we will return with in just a minute. Hi, I'm Matthew Goldstein, the Chancellor of the City University of New York. Look who's teaching at CUNY. Michio Kaku, string field theorist and international authority on theoretical physics. John Corleano, Academy Award and Pulitzer Prize winner in music. David Nassau, winner, Bancroft Prize for Best Biography. Jill Bargonetti, Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers. Gregory Rabassa, recipient the National Medal of Arts in 2006 from President Bush. Elizabeth Nunez, winner, American Book Award. Godfrey GUMBS, American Physical Society Fellow and member, New York Academy of Sciences. World-class talent, award-winning scholars, CUNY is their classroom, CUNY is your university. I'm Matthew Goldstein, and we are continuing our discussion with four of our very talented scientists here today. And I'd like to turn the discussion now to our audience and ask our first questioner to identify herself and to ask a question of any of our panelists today.
Hi, my name is Mei Kong, and I'm from Hunter College, and I'm right now a biology major. And right now I'm a pre-med student, and I have recently gotten accepted into Cornell linkage program with Hunter. And as of now, I'm trying to decide whether to go to medical school, just purely to pursue a career as a physician, or pursue a career as a physician scientist with MD PhD program. So just as I'm listening to your discussions about, you know, it just appeared to me like science, being a scientist is such it's really cool now. It's so amazing. I mean, I have also been working during the summer at marine biology lab, and we did do research. And as Professor Bargonetti has mentioned, our mentor, Professor William Cohen, has led us to, you know, pursue projects and then just figure out what our mistakes are. And we just found out, like, it was really frustrating in the beginning because we couldn't get the data. Like, we got the data, it's just we can't get the picture. We just need one good picture. And it was really frustrating. And finally, when we got it, it was just, yeah, yes. So I'm just wondering, what are the important factors that are different between, you know, being a physician and like being a physician scientist, like, and I know that it's really hard and very time-consuming to be a MD PhD. So, would you like to give some pointers?
Would you like to start?
Well, I can start. I think you have to try to figure out what really drives you and whether your goal is to do original research or whether your goal is to serve patients or something in between. And as Jill said, let it happen. Let the work take you where it goes. And you don't always have to make an irrevocable decision all that early on. I think particularly with MD, PhD. You just have to see, you know, what really gets you excited. And I would say they're both great choices. So let
Anybody
it be what
else
you
wanna-
like.
Jill, do you want to?
Yeah, I would echo that. Clearly, I'm not a physician, so I'm just a scientist. But, you know, I think if you like working with people and you want to have contact with different people every day, then being a physician is clearly more of the choice. If you want to, you know, help with health issues, but you enjoy the quiet of the discovery in the laboratory and working on your own and seeing people, not every 10 minutes, different people, then probably being in the laboratory is better for you. So it really becomes finding out who you are and what would make your day more enjoyable, because whichever career you choose, once you enter in that career, that's what you'll be doing all day, every day. And so you want to pick the one that makes you happy.
And don't be stressed about it. You'll know it when it comes. and as Professor Stark said, it's not irrevocable. You can always make your adjustments over time. Yes?
Hi, I'm SOUMITRI SESHADRI from the College of Staten Island. And I'm studying mechanical engineering. I'm in my 4th year. I'll be graduating pretty soon. My question is, generally it's open to almost any of you. I know in the beginning Mr. Goldstein stated that the interest in science has been dying out in students. And actually, when I was a sophomore, when I was studying engineering, I wanted to see what engineering is outside of college. I wanted to see how practical it is and everything. So I was actually looking for an internship opportunity. But every time I went online to go to the CUNY Honors intranet, I just saw internship opportunity for accounting majors, business majors, this and that, but nothing with the engineering. And that's actually one of the reasons a couple of my friends dropped out of engineering, because they couldn't understand the concepts of it, and they tried their hard to get an internship, but they couldn't. So being that it made the engineering so hard for them, that they decided to change their major and went to business, and now they're in that field. So my question is, does CUNY Honors, would it do anything to actually improve students' interest in engineering? I mean, engineering is actually one of the most important sciences. And would they have any sort of connections with the companies or something so they can give opportunities to students so they can pursue engineering?
After the show, why don't you and I have a conversation? I have some ideas for you that we might be able to embed into the... Are you in the Honors College at the College of Staten Island? Okay. By the way, some of the most successful business people that I know got degrees in engineering and then went and got an MBA afterwards. So Michio?
Right. I teach at City College, and we have one of the largest engineering programs, graduating a huge number of African Americans, for example. It's a real powerhouse, the engineering program. And when they graduate, big corporations come and recruit, okay, because they know the quality of the degree coming from City College. They know that you're going to get top quality people coming from the engineering program. They come to recruit. Also, if you think about the business world, I grew up in Palo Alto, where we have Hewlett and Packard, Varian Associates, and so on and so forth. They were engineers who then went into business management. To go the other way is extremely difficult. It is easier for an engineer to learn the dynamics of business management than a businessman to learn all about microchips and all the inner workings of the internet and so on and so forth. So I tell my students that they can almost write their paycheck if they start off in business and then, start off in engineering and then pursue an interest in business management. That's where literally some of the biggest billionaires on the planet Earth have come from.
Good. Derrick, did you want to comment on that or another question?
Actually, I'd look to go back to May's question or comment. One of the major things that's happening now, and it's going to probably be going on in the future, is what's called translational research, which is taking basic research that's going on in the laboratory and having direct application to human health. And so MD PhDs are going to be vital in that process, simply because they will have the research skills as well as the MD skills to help bridge that gap. And so by all means, an MD PhD is a great way to go. It keeps your options open and allows you to do what's going to be part of the future for the next 15, 20 years, I'm sure.
May I ask also, what are the...
Wait for the microphone.
May I ask what are the additional requirements to get accepted into the MD PhD program? I know that you need excellent scores on the MCATs, like 38 or above, and perfect GPA. And it also depends on different other requirements by specific programs. But what other requirements?
Research.
Research.
If you're going to go into an MD PhD program, they're going to want to see that you've done research before and that you have a passion for it, that you're really excited about doing that research. Because that's what's going to get you through a program. MD PhD program is not an easy program. And so they want people who are highly motivated and will have shown that motivation by having worked in a lab. So for example, your time at
Marine Biology Lab.
the Marine Biology Lab is excellent. And the fact that you're going into the Cornell Linkage program, again, you'll be doing research there. Excellent.
I'm doing it right now. There. Okay. Thank you.
Next question. Gentleman in the back in the green shirt.
Hi, I'm Michael Young. I'm at the College of Staten Island. My question is, as a theorist, at what point does one's ideas become generally accepted in the scientific community? Because I know science requires a lot of rote memorization and application of certain universal concepts. But when is or is it rare that someone's able to think outside the box and apply new ideas towards a specific field?
Michio, you want to take a stab
Well,
at that?
we do have what are called paradigm shifts, where the prevailing paradigm or way of thinking is overthrown, like literally overnight. In 1925, with the coming of the quantum theory, just within a span of 2 or 3 years, the atom went from being this black box that no one knew anything about to a situation where we were looking inside the atom, calculating the transitions inside the atom itself. That happened within 2 years' time. The paradigm shift was obvious because you could measure the spectral lines of hydrogen, and that in turn gave us the electronic revolution of today. Laser beams, your internet connection, iPods, all of that comes out of the quantum theory. Relativity took longer. In 1905, Einstein got special relativity, but it took many years for people to accept it because it was very difficult. Space and time were involved, and the Nazis even tried to ban the teaching of relativity. So when there's an immediate application, then physicists immediately see the implications and throw away the old paradigm and adopt the new, like with the quantum theory. But with relativity, it took a lot longer because it involves things that are very difficult to measure: the speed of light, space and time slowing down. But now, of course, it's part of our everyday life. All the electronic appliances and miracles of today owe their origin to relativity and the quantum theory. So being a theoretician, sometimes it also could be lonely, because it may take decades for your theory to be proven. I work on the theory of everything. It's almost impossible to prove it directly because it's a theory of the universe. You would have to create a baby universe in the laboratory, and that's awfully hard to do. However, later this year, the Large Hadron Collider gets turned on. It is the biggest machine of science in the world, and we hope to test the periphery of string theory. And so this €5 billion machine will be turned on, and we hope it's going to give us a new paradigm shift. It's built outside Geneva, Switzerland, 27 kilometers in circumference. You could put the city of Geneva inside the machine. That's how big this machine is. And we hope to get a new paradigm shift because we hope to create a piece of Genesis outside Geneva, Switzerland later this year.
It's a very interesting time to work in cosmology, I would imagine. Right before the show, we talked about the wonderful piece that was in the New York Times this past weekend about dark matter and dark energy, and they talked about that new facility in Geneva. So it is a very exciting time, and I'm sure you're waiting to see some of these results. Did you have a question?
My name is Caballero from John Jay College, and my question is, how can you engage, or at what time should you engage someone in science? Because I work in a preschool area, and I want to know, should I be showing them right now, and when is it too late to start science? Because I also have a deep interest in string theory. So,
Jill, do you want to take a shot at that?
Okay. I don't think it's ever too early, so I think you can begin with preschoolers, and I actually have, I have 2 sons and have worked with their classes as preschoolers and had them isolate DNA from their saliva cells, so and they can see it and they can understand it. So I don't think it's ever too early. Is it ever too late? I think for certain sciences it's hard to enter them if you don't have the basics, because there are a lot of math concepts and just basic concepts that need to be set down to go into college level science classes. And unfortunately sometimes for students, if they don't have those basics, they struggle through the educational system. But I think that in terms of entering science in different ways, it's never too late. So as Derrick was saying, we have translational research, we have transdisciplinary research, and scientists are collaborating with people in all different fields. So I think that it's never too late to collaborate with scientists and bring your ideas, depending upon what they are, to the discussion, but it may become too late to do certain types of science.
Derrick, Ruth, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that and sort of reinforce the idea that if you get to a point where you can't pick up the math, I think the math is the critical filter, then it's too late. Otherwise, I think not, and I certainly agree that it's never too early.
There's a great example, and Michio knows this man much more directly than I do, but Ed Witten. Ed Witten is one of the most extraordinary mathematicians / theoretical physicists that the world knows today. And he was a student of history, I believe, Michio, at Brandeis University, and didn't study physics at all, and didn't know much mathematics at all, and then went to Princeton and got a PhD in physics and won the Fields Medal, which is the most coveted mathematics prize for an individual who is recognized for their work under 40. So there are examples, but I think they are rare examples of that. Michio?
Also, you mentioned string theory. The math, of course, is quite prodigious, but to understand the basics of it, the principles are very pictorial. Einstein once said that if a theory cannot be explained to a child through pictures, if it cannot be explained that way, the theory is probably useless. String theory is very pictorial. Okay. In fact, several off-Broadway plays have been written now about string theory. I get inquiries from science fiction writers, from playwrights, who are doing things on Broadway, doing things in music. Several cantatas have been dedicated to string theory. So to look at the picture behind string theory, you don't need that much advanced mathematics. But to actually work on the theory itself requires about 5 years of calculus.
I see some students twitching in the audience. Can we take you?
My name is SHANI Porter. I'm studying at Queens College, and I'm studying philosophy, so I'm definitely one of the people that you spoke of as afraid of science, but hearing you guys speak about it makes it sound really interesting. So I was wondering if you could recommend ways to get involved in science, if not as a career, but just for the love of learning.
Well, the most obvious one for me, if you're a philosopher, is to get into mathematical logic. And there are wonderful examples, I mean, profound examples of very, very eminent people who studied philosophy and then migrated into very fundamental questions that only could be answered in modal logic and mathematical logic. And that would be a very interesting way and get you interested in mathematics if that is your proclivity. Derrick?
I guess as far as biology would be concerned, I would say ethics. One of the major things that's going to be occurring in the near future is going to be dealing with genetic ethics. With the sequencing of the human genome, the ability to know a person's genetic predisposition to certain diseases is going to be out there. Who should have access to this information? Should this information be used when determining insurance? Things on those lines are all ethical questions that a philosophy major, such as yourself, would be poised to answer if they had a biology background to go along with their philosophy major. So I think biological ethics probably be the way to go.
Michio?
And also in physics, you bump up against philosophy almost immediately. When you learn the quantum theory, you learn, for example, that cats can be dead and alive simultaneously. You learn that you could be two places at the same time, and you can be, dead and alive, simultaneously. And when you get into cosmology, then you talked about the existence of God. What happened before creation? What happened before God? Can you be outside time? Can you be outside space? These are the questions that we actually deal with string theory all the time. Because in string theory now we're leaning toward a multiverse of universes, where universes can exist like soap bubbles in many, many states, like a bubble bath, where each bubble represents a universe. So immediately you come up across religious questions, cosmological questions, philosophical questions.
That cat was Schrodinger's cat, for those of you. Next question. Oh, I'm sorry, Jill, go ahead.
So I also think history and philosophy of science, the relationship of science to art. So very often people think about science and art as very separate, but it's become, it's increasingly clear that scientists are very creative in nature, and that many artists think about science, surrealism, and for myself, I always think about the connection of dance and science. A lot of dancers become scientists, and there's a lot to be done in the history and philosophy of science, where people really are not describing what has gone on in the recent time, to put it out there for the general public so that it becomes cool for everybody, because as part of this national security problem and part of the problem right now in our culture is that everybody wants to hear about who's singing this song and which video is on and what's really cool. But to have literature that's going to make young people want to read it. They love about mutants, but to really understand how this science has come about and what a mutation is, and to make science accessible, I think is key, and that's something we need lots of people to do.
There's a wonderful book I could recommend to you called, I think it's called The Golden Braid, Eschel, Gödel, and Bach. Did any of you read that? By Richard Hofstadter, who was a very eminent philosopher and really showed the marriage of mathematics and art, philosophy. It's a big fat book, but a great book. Next question. Yes?
Hi, I'm ALINA LEVCHUK. I'm studying biomedical engineering at the City College. And Dr. Kaku has mentioned that project in Switzerland. I was just wondering how important the international collaborations are in science, and how can they influence the future of science?
International collaborations are very important. For example, it was a physicist who wrote the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web was written for the physicists at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, so they can communicate with physicists around the world about the nature of particles. Now, of course, teenagers, kids use the World Wide Web. And when you write a paper, instead of submitting it to publication in a journal and waiting a year for publication, you now submit it to the Los Alamos computer. We string theorists created that computer. We were the first ones to create the international web system, whereby if you are in a small country in the boondocks, you can get priority rights to the microsecond as to exactly when that paper was posted. Also, papers are now written by collaborations with people that have never met each other. We only know each other by email addresses. We write each other questions and answers, and we write joint publications, even though we've never met them before, because of the power of the internet. Organizing scientific conferences is much easier than it used to be. We used to have to write letters to each participant. Now we send emails to everybody and organize the conferences very rapidly. And as I mentioned, the H-1B visa makes possible so-called geniuses to flood into the United States to preserve the cutting edge of science. It's sad that we have to rely on that, but at the cutting edge, at the PhD level, about 50% of graduate students in physics are in fact foreign-born. So the cross-fertilization is very important. While traditionally in Europe, there was historically less of a tradition of collaboration. If you were at the University of Berlin, you stayed there all your life. In this country, we like to mix people up, and the Europeans are now copying our method of working.
Add a little bit to that. Also, with science becoming more and more expensive, it's very difficult for one individual or even one country to shoulder the burden of that. So for example, a lot of the different genome projects to sequence a lot of the different organisms are multinational. Each different lab and different nation takes a little bit of the genome to sequence simply because it's too expensive to do on an individual basis. So yeah, cooperativity across nations is very important.
Thank you. David.
My name is David Bauer. I'm a student in chemistry at the City College. Professor Kaku had talked earlier about his memory of Einstein passing away and how Einstein to him was such a big figure. I guess growing up, I always felt somewhat removed from scientists, that they were these mythical figures, with pocket protectors maybe, but that they were never really accessible to people. And I was wondering, to what extent is it possible to change that image, to make science seem less removed, to make scientists not that person in the tower with a mad scientist, if you will? And how can we bring them down to the level so that a 4 or 5-year-old can see themselves becoming that person and maybe still having a family and a life?
Today in the science section of the New York Times is a very good example. There's a very famous mathematician whose work some of us know well, Terence Tao, who's a professor at UCLA, young fellow, who was a field medal winner, actually won the field medal last year. When the article was written, the portrayal of this very, very brilliant mathematician was a fellow in tennis shoes, khakis, a t-shirt, backpack, family man, very engaging with students, loves rock and roll, loves to have fun. I think it's important to know that scientists are people like the rest of us. They enjoy a good time, they enjoy their family, they enjoy friends. So I think the more they become accessible to us through the media, Michio Kaku, a brilliant scientist, but when you see his presentations on television, you can say, this is a cool guy. I like this guy. He's funny, he's approachable, I understand him, he makes things easy for me. So I think the media has a big role to play in taking down these mythical figures, as you refer to, and making them much more human.
One problem was that within the scientific field, we had this self-inflicted injury that any scientist who tried to engage the public was ostracized. Carl Sagan, a very big popularizer, was denied a membership into the National Academy of Sciences. He was kicked out, not even allowed in, because people thought he was a, quote, mere popularizer. Two things happened. One is Stephen Hawking has shown that you can become a rock star within the field of science. And also, our machine, the Super Collider, was canceled in 1993. It was a huge shock because the Russians weren't competing with us anymore, and we couldn't rely on that. Now we have to, quote, sing for our supper. We have to engage the public and tell them why their taxpayers' money should go to finding a machine that we call the Genesis machine, because they're not going to simply give us money because it's the Cold War anymore.
Jill, anything on this? Ruth?
Just that the media has a role, but we have a responsibility to make the abstruse things that we do live for the broader public. And that's hard to do because it takes us out of ourselves, but we really have that responsibility. So that's what I would say.
Derrick?
I'd agree with Ruth. As scientists, part of our job is, of course, science education, which means going to the elementary and junior high schools, as Jill has done with her children, and introducing science to these students and showing that you can be a scientist and a person, that you don't wear a pocket protector, that you don't have a second brain, or that you're a normal person. So a lot of it has to do with us going out and being personal with students.
Thank you, Jill Bargonetti. Thank you, Michio Kaku. Thank you, Ruth Stark. Thank you, Derrick Brazill. Thank you, our wonderful students. Many of you are at the Honors College, others pursuing different degree programs. This could have gone on for another hour or two. I thank the four of you for bringing yourselves in a very humane and honest way to our audience and to the students here today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to seeing you next on the following segments of CUNY Honors.